Hello and welcome to Backlisted, the podcast which gives new life to old books. The book featured in today's show needs very little introduction. It's the 1982 bestseller, The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, aged 13 3/4 by Sue Townsend. I'm John Mitchinson, a writer and publisher.
And I'm Andy Miller, the author of The Year of Reading Dangerously. And today we welcome a return guest from the past. It's like in Doctor Who when they bring back an old companion from many years earlier. And she last joined us to discuss Philip Larkin's A Girl in Winter, which, in a behind-the-scenes glimpse, she didn't actually like very much, live at the Port Eliot Festival back in September 2018. It's the writer and noted diarist, Nina Stibbe. Hello, Nina.
Hello.
Hi,
Thanks
Nina.
for having me back.
Thanks for coming back with a book this time that you have warmer feelings for, I hope.
Yes, I do. Definitely.
Okay, good. Leicester-born Nina is the author of 7 books. Love, Nina, winner of the Non-Fiction Book of the Year Award at the National Book Awards 2014, shortlisted for Waterstone's Book of the Year, was adapted for BBC television. Her novels Man at the Helm, 2014, and Paradise Lodge, 2016, were both adapted for serialisation on BBC Radio 4 and shortlisted for the Bollinger Everyman Woodhouse Prize for Comic Fiction. Her third novel, Reasons to be Cheerful, 2019, won both the Bollinger Everyman Woodhouse Prize for Comic Fiction and the Comedy Women in Print Award. A collection of stories and articles, An Almost Perfect Christmas, 2017, was broadcast on BBC Radio 4 over Christmas 2020. Her most recent novel, One Day I Shall Astonish the World, 2022, was shortlisted for the Bollinger Everyman Woodhouse Prize for Comic Fiction. How many bottles of Bollinger champagne have you now accumulated as a result of your writing endeavours?
Oh, well, it's funny you should ask that, because when I won it, it was a rollover year. Do you remember the terrible controversy where they didn't award it? They didn't give the prize.
Yes, that's right. It was a kind of publicity stunt.
They said there wasn't anything with the right kind of lols. And so when I won it, whatever year it was a rollover. So I got lots and lots of champagne.
Did you get any money as well?
You get a pig, don't you?
You get a pig, but I got 2 pigs.
Rollover pigs. Amazing.
You were awarded your pigs at the Hay Festival. Somebody said to me, don't be nervous of the pig. You must get in and cuddle the pig for the Sunday Times. So I did, because I like pigs. And so there are loads of photographs that pop up of me all over the place, of me literally hugging this Gloucester old spot. But it's a lovely pig. It's a lovely pig.
How marvellous.
Nina's latest book, Went to London, Took the Dog, The Diary of a 60-Year-Old Runaway, was published in 2023 and has been described by our very own John Mitchinson as the funniest book he has read since The Common Years by Gilly Cooper.
Wow. Really?
Quite true. I think it's brilliant. I love the way you thread all those real people into it. Obviously, it's a diary, but you know how good you are at writing diaries. And that will become obvious because we're going to, and that's what we're here to discuss. The first volume of Adrian Mole was published in 1982 by Methuen. It's the diary of a year in the life of a teenage boy from a relatively poor working-class family in Leicester who's decided he's an intellectual. Set in 1981 and 1982, the book takes place against a background of real events: the rise of Mrs. Thatcher, the wedding of Charles and Diana, the Falklands War, and the local showing of Monty Python's Life of Brian. Against this, Adrian charts his physical and emotional development as he works his way through the great works of world literature, fretting about his spots and the size of his thing. Throughout, he records his obsession with Pandora, a girl from a wealthier but impeccably left-wing family, his troubled relationship with schoolmate Nigel, his fondness for Bert Baxter, an irascible pensioner, and the turbulent marriage of his parents, whose drinking, smoking and extramarital affairs cause him great concern.
Adrian Mole began his life as Nigel Mole, a character in a couple of stories Sue Townsend wrote for a now-defunct arts journal called, simply, Magazine, while she was writer-in-residence at the Phoenix Theatre in Leicester in the late 1970s. Encouraged by friends to send these stories to the BBC, she was eventually commissioned by the head of radio drama, John Tidyman, everyone listening to this has read The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole and knows that John Tiedemann is a recurring character in that book and subsequent ones, to turn them into a radio play. The Diary of Nigel Mole, aged 13 3/4, was broadcast by BBC Radio 4 on New Year's Day 1982 and led to the book being commissioned in short order by Methuen. After a slow start, it became a runaway bestseller, smashing the 2 million copy mark within 2 years and spawning 7 sequels that have been translated into more than 30 languages and sold over 20 million copies. It has been adapted into 3 television series. Townsend herself turned it into a very successful stage play in 1984 and was working on a full musical theatre version at the time of her death in 2014, which was released to great acclaim at Leicester's Curve Theatre in 2015. The book has become a part of British literary life and always polls highly when people are asked to vote for their favourite books of all time. In 2019, The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, aged 13 3/4, appeared on the BBC Arts 100 Most Inspiring Novels as one of 10 books in the Coming of Age category, alongside such backlisted favourites as So Long See You Tomorrow by William Maxwell, slightly less amusing book, The Country Girls by Edna O'Brien, and Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. Now, I want to already observe that you'll have heard the voice of our producer, Nicky Birch, today, because she's elbowed her way onto the air.
I have.
Because she so enjoyed reading or rereading, we'll find out later, this book. Honestly, Nicky, you've been doing this now for almost as long as we have. I've never seen you look so happy under any circumstances, let alone on a show, not in person, not you know. Could you just want to say tell people why you wanted to say something today?
I've just, I spent the week listening. I listened to an audiobook version of Adrian Mole and I have just not stopped giggling. And I'm still giggling. And the idea of you talking and even quoting from Adrian Mole is making me laugh. I'm anticipating the laughs that I'm going to get just and the joy of listening to you talk about it. Yeah, this is great.
Well, it's always nice to have a good clack standing in the wings, ready to laugh. So thank you very much. Now, on my script here, it says, so how good is it really and how has it lasted? Is there more going on than just nostalgia? In the bin with that. In the bin with it. Nicky has answered that question. Of course, there's no further questions, Your Honour. We'll discuss all this and much more after this message from our sponsors.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
And we're back. But before we start on the main course, it's a good moment to mention that we'll be picking up elements of today's discussion in our next week's Lock Listed, our show for patrons. You can subscribe for that at patreon.com/backlisted. And 5 years of superior book, film and music chat, plus ad-free early versions of the main show will be all yours.
But come with us now as the virtual screen goes wobbly and we return to Leicester in 1982 for The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, aged 13 3/4 by Sue Townsend. And let's ask the question we always ask on Backlisted. First of all, Nina Stibbe, where were you? Who were you? What were you doing when you first read The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole?
Okay, I was 20. I know exactly when I read it because I mention it in my own letters that are published, so I can Look at that. So I read it in 1983. I just turned 20, and I didn't want to read it. I was a reader, and I was reading things like Salinger and, Catch-22 and things like that. And I thought it was not really for me. But everybody around me was reading it. And I mean everybody, my parents, my grandparents, my siblings, my friends. And I left school at age 15, and the only way of getting away from home was to be a nanny or an au pair. So I'd taken this job. I'd ended up in North London, and by chance I was living in this street of very accomplished cultural figures, people like Alan Bennett and Claire Tomalin, who was then I think she was the literary editor of the Sunday Times, and Alice Thomas Ellis and Jonathan Miller and David Gentleman. And my boss, the woman I was the nanny to, was the Mary Kay Wilmers. She was the then deputy editor of the London Review of Books, then became the editor. So I was little me from Leicester, having not an O-level or an A-level to my name, living with all these people. And they all dropped in the whole time. I mean, literally would come in. Alan Bennett would come in for dinner almost every night. And they were all talking about it. I slightly resisted it because it looked a bit popular for me in a quite an Adrian kind of way.
Understood.
Anyway, I did read it. And honestly now, when I'm asked, and I'm asked a lot what my favourite books are, almost whatever the criteria, it's Adrian Mole. Not just because it was a great book, but it was, and it was so funny and so brilliant, but it completely changed my life. It didn't just change me as a writer because I was already doing bits of writing. It changed me as a person. It genuinely did. And I can track that through the book that was published of the letters I was writing then. And this is sounding really self-obsessed, but it's the truth. I was from Leicester. I had worried all through my childhood about my mother's promiscuity and her drunkenness in quite a jolly way, like Adrian did. I wasn't sort of weeping and, I wasn't depressed, but I was thinking, how am I going to thrive academically if she's having it off with that guy down the road? And that was in my head. I thought we're going to, I honestly had this thing in my head, which was, if anybody finds out how much my mother drinks, we will become wards of court. I'd learned that phrase. And Adrian worries about exactly the same thing. He's constantly going on about it. I thought I was very clever and I wrote bits of poetry. So to find him, even though he was only, 13, 14 and I was 20, it was funny, entertaining, and all those things that everybody else felt. But for me, it was incredibly reassuring.
Would you say that reading Adrian Mole helped you find your voice as a writer?
Yes.
Writing funny
Very
stuff
much.
And deciding to be a funny writer.
Completely.
Yeah?
So first of all, I changed what I was looking at and how I was seeing the world. Secondly, it was as if I'd been given permission to write about being an ordinary person from Leicester, and that those concerns could be funny and could be interesting. And you were allowed to write about that stuff because he wasn't from Yorkshire and achingly poor. He was from Leicester, and they was sort of okay. There was nothing glamorous either way. The other thing is that my book, which is entirely made up of the letters I wrote at that time, was published in 2013. And that was my the first book of mine to be published. I then rewrote, because that book did well, basically written as Adrian by complete accident. I then rewrote all the novels I'd subsequently started. So Man at the Helm, my second novel, I then wrote in my own voice because... So indirectly, Sue Townsend just did everything for me.
Gave you your voice.
She completely gave me my voice and gave me permission to write about I haven't set any books in, Monaco or London or Paris. They're all set in Leicester.
Yeah. Okay, Hey, well, people will be pleased to learn that your new novel Nina Stibbe and the Weapons of Mass Destruction will be published next year.
Can I just say one other thing about first reading it?
Yes, please do.
So I've read it, and I'm now part of the gang of everybody, including Alan Bennett and Mary Kay Wilmers, who love this book. And we're all chatting about it and saying how brilliant it is. And this is so Adrian, I can't believe it. When I look back, my life could be very different. You could be reading a review that I wrote at that time, because when I said to Mary Kay Wilmers and Alan Bennett, yeah, I loved it. I loved Adrian Mole. Mary Kay Wilmers turned to me and said, hey, do you want to write a review of Adrian Mole for the London Review of Books?
Oh,
right?
amazing.
Now imagine if I had, my life would have been very different. But what I thought was, I became Adrian, like I think people do a bit when they first read it. I thought to myself, you cheeky cow. You know, I pick up the dry cleaning, I make the turkey burgers, I'm picking the kids up, and now I'm doing that bit of your job as well. And I said to her, sort of, no thanks, love, that's your job. And I declined it in the Adrian style. It was, when I look back, it's just,
Oh, thank you so much.
A lost review. Oh.
Well,
this is it. Maybe this is it. We're getting to hear the Nina Stibbe review.
So
here,
let's
live.
quickly go round the rest of us then, and everyone's got a mole origin story, perhaps not as triumphant as Nina's, but still though, John.
I read it in 1983. I'd spent 1981 living a slightly Adrian Mole-y existence, although I was sort of 18, living in Sunderland, mostly with my grandparents and doing a bit of travelling. And a lot of the Mole references, I'm writing a diary of such utter pretentiousness. In fact, I almost wish I'd found it. But I remember one entry started, today Anwar Sadat was assassinated. I wasn't. It's that kind of level of teenage horror.
Magnificent.
I can't think of any book that is more irresistible, really, when you read it. If you've lived a kind of lower middle class, sort of working class life in this country, it's brilliant comic writing. Yeah. So I read it and devoured it at the same time I was reading Douglas Adams, and I held them both in equal esteem.
Yes, indeed. We'll come on to him too, I think, in relation to this. Very interesting. Nicky, I know you've just read it. Had you read it before?
Yes, I had read it before, but not since I first read it, or actually had it read to me. It was published in 82, and The Growing Pains was published in 84, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
The sequel. Yeah. So I suspect we read both of them at the same time, because I was born in 75. So I think when I was about 11 or 12 and was on holiday with my family, my mum and my dad and my brother. My mum read them out to us we were all sleeping in one room. And I can remember really clearly, can't remember the holiday, but I remember lying in bed, all of us lying in bed and laughing and laughing and laughing while my mum read the books to us. And it was just such a lovely, joyous kind of family moment where we found it. We all really loved Adrian Mole. And then we watched the TV series and, locked in. But not relatable necessarily, just funny, funny.
Yeah.
Just funny. Now, that's a very, very, very good point. So for what it's worth, I have a slightly different relationship to Adrian Mole, these books, than the three of you. And I'll try and do this quickly and just say, the thing is, when this book was published, The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, aged 13 3/4, I was myself 13 3/4.
You were.
Funny.
And my initials, Andy Miller, are the same as Adrian Mole's. And because I was an already anxious and self-conscious boy, I found it actually terribly difficult to read Adrian Mole.
Andy.
And I always have done. Right? No, listen, it's this interesting and probably unique feeling. Nina.
Yes.
I would read it and think, as an aficionado of comic writing, even then, I would read it and think, this is brilliant. The beats in this are hilarious. The way characters come in and out, the use of callbacks. Even as a teenager, you're sort of looking at these things and thinking, oh, that's brilliant, right? We last heard that phrase 30 pages earlier, and she's landed it right here in the right spot, right? So all that stuff I could get with. The problem was
too relatable.
That I kept doing and saying things, feeling they were original and necessarily emotional, and then seeing them played for laughs on the page in front of me. Having my own, Nina, having my own adolescent pain burlesqued for everyone's amusement was quite tough.
Andy, I have to say, I spent this week listening to it thinking, this is Andy Miller, I have to say.
Okay, bless you. Bless you, bless you, bless you. We will come on to this as well, right? But I just want to also say that I've been writing a long piece for our Patreon about, while we've been preparing for this show, I've been writing a long piece about Kate Bush, whose music I love, and whose music I loved when I was 13 3/4. And I have titled that essay, The Growing Pains of Kate Bush by Andy Miller, 57 1/4. Because it seems to me she and I are locked in a mole-like adolescent relationship forever, apparently. Forever. Anyway, Nina.
She's like your Pandora, Andy.
I think she, in a sense, she is.
In a real, very real
Nina,
sense.
when I reread this a couple of weeks ago, I had that wonderful and horrible feeling of thinking, wait, I haven't changed at all. This still makes me feel slightly like someone's laughing at me, looking over my shoulder and laughing at me, which of course is not what I think. Sue's terribly compassionate. It's just, it's so good and so accurate an observation of all this stuff that it's a slightly queasy experience for me. But anyway, why don't we hear a little bit from Sue herself, her husband Colin Broadway, her editor at Methuen, Geoffrey Strachan, and the aforementioned John Tidyman, as they discuss those very early steps of Nigel Mole.
Oh no, we never thought it was going to be a hit. We thought it would be a good book.
She was shy and amazed at the success of the first Adrian Mole book in particular.
I thought it would be a one-off.
Our first print run was very modest. It's a few thousand copies, I think, and she was very worried about that.
I was astonished when it started to sell.
Sue never really believed that anybody would want to publish it or anybody would want to read it. And when she found that they were going to print 10,000 copies, she thought, well, let's sell a couple of hundred and then it'd be pulp the rest.
I remember your having said, oh dear, the first print is 7,000 books, and they're never going to sell them. Well, of course, they sold like hot cakes, and it went into first edition, second edition. I mean, you couldn't buy the books. They couldn't print them fast enough.
So the reason I wanted to listen to that is because of the P word.
Yes,
Nina.
the phenomenon.
Phenomenal success. You described it to us not half an hour ago as a phenomenon. I wonder if you could remind people of the nature of that phenomenon and quite how massive these books were in the early 1980s.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was sort of forced to read it because I'd never known a book that everybody was reading. Everybody, my whole family, all my friends, and it was just coming at me. And what was interesting, I remember I was thinking about it the other day, and I was thinking it sort of behaved more like a TV show in that people talked about it, didn't they? John will remember this. You were probably too young, but people were talking about it, and you'd see people reading it. So you'd see it on the tube and the bus and stuff, and you'd hear people laughing. And that's kind of the highest bar, isn't it? The laugh out loud. I think the books we most want to share are books that make us laugh out loud. They're the ones that people most want to talk about because it's like you're telling somebody a joke and you're being funny yourself.
It seemed to me it lived somewhere in the same place as Fungus the Bogeyman, which is there was a kind of naughtiness about it when it was first published. A kind of, she's talking about adolescent things in in a direct, relatively non-coy way. Just as Fungus the Bogeyman talks about all sorts of horrible stuff in a non-coy way, and plays it for laughs, but plays it for truth at the same time, or mingles the two together.
I think a key thing that I remember being different about it, because obviously Hitchhiker was around in my life at the same time, is it's just the sheer range of the readership.
Yes.
It wasn't a cult book that was just me and my mates loving, and it was like, as Nina said, it was everybody, from, you know, being discussed on television, grandmothers giving it to their grandkids for Christmas. I mean, there have been cult hits since that, maybe, I don't know, Dan Brown.
Yes.
You remember that one, Andy?
I am familiar with him.
50 Shades of Grey, where everybody goes
Yeah.
mad for a while, and everybody feels they have, like Nina says, you kind of have to read it because you have to have an opinion about it, and you feel bad having an opinion about it if you haven't actually read it, which wasn't quite how I came to it. But I remember it was the year that I went to Oxford, and it was astonishing. Even there, it was still in late '83. It was still being talked about enthusiastically by English undergraduates wanting to test their comic skills.
My favourite story about of mole mania and the phenomenon of the success of it is that listeners of a certain age will recall the 1980s television adaptation, which spawned a hit single.
Oh, yes.
Hit single.
Ian Dury.
Profoundly in Love with Pandora by Ian Dury.
Yeah.
Now, the brilliant stuff about that is you will recall there's a scene, I've got it here, Sunday, May the 24th. I have decided to paint my room black. Yes, Nicky, I did something very similar.
Of course.
It is a colour I like. I can't live a moment longer with noddy wallpaper. Anyway, Adrian tries to paint over. They keep coming through like a ghost.
Then he has to use felt tip to go over them again.
Ian Dury, who was no stranger to controversy, ran into terrible trouble when his record company wouldn't release the track he originally wanted on the B side of Profoundly in Love with Pandora, which was called simply Fuck Off Noddy. To this day, it's very difficult to hear. You can find it on YouTube, but it's like,
that's brilliant.
It's a kind of, it's like he almost submitted two songs, a charming one and a less charming one. Nina, would you like to read us a passage from The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole?
Well, I'm going to read a few entries that come from the summer holidays, because of course that's the brilliant thing. He has this long period where he's not at school, and it all changes. And so this is where his mother has left his father and is living with this guy, Mr. Lucas. There's a bit of a tug of love going on because he has to choose who to go on holiday with. Saturday, August 1st, postcard from my mother. She wants me to go on holiday with her and creep Lucas. They are going to Scotland. I hope they enjoy themselves. Tuesday, August 11th. Got another postcard from my mother. Dear Adie, you've no idea how much I want to see you. The mothering bond is as strong as ever. I know... I know you feel threatened by my involvement with Bimbo. But really, Adie, there is no need. Bimbo fulfills my sexual needs. No more, no less. So, Adie, grow up and come to Scotland. Lots of love, Pauline, in brackets, mother. P.S. We leave on 15th, catch 8:22 train to Sheffield. Saturday, August 15th. My mother and creep Lucas met me at Sheffield. My mother looked dead thin and has started dressing in clothes that are too young for her. Lucas creep was wearing jeans. His belly was hanging over his belt. I pretended to be asleep until we got to Scotland. Lucas mauled my mother about, even whilst he was driving. We are at a place called Loch Lubnaig. I'm in bed in a log cabin. My mother and Lucas have gone to the village to try to buy cigarettes. At least that's their story. Saturday, August 22nd. Went to see Rob Roy's grave. Saw it, came back. Sunday, August 23rd. My mother has made friends with a couple called Mr. and Mrs. Ball. They have gone off to Stirling Castle. Mrs. Ball has got a daughter who is a writer. I asked how her daughter qualified to be one. Mrs. Ball said that her daughter was dropped on her head as a child and has been a bit queer ever since. It is Mrs. Ball's birthday. They all came back to our log cabin to celebrate. I complained about the noise at 1 a.m, 2 a.m, 3 a.m, and 4 a.m. At 5 a.m, they decided to climb the mountain. I pointed out to them that they were blind drunk, too old, unqualified, unfit, and lacking in any survival techniques, and had no first aid kit, and weren't wearing stout boots, and had no compass or map or sustaining hot drinks. My protest fell on deaf ears. They all climbed the mountain, came down, and were cooking eggs and bacon by 11:30. As I write, Mr. and Mrs. Ball are canoeing on the loch. They must be on drugs. Wednesday, August 26th. We drove through Glasgow at 11 a.m. in the morning. Yet I counted 27 drunks in 1 mile. All the shops, except the DIY shops, had grills on the windows. Off-licences had rolls of barbed wire and broken glass on the roofs. We had a walk around for a bit, and then my mother nagged Lucas Creep into taking her into the Glasgow Art Gallery. I intended to sit in the car and read Glen Coe, but because of all the drunks staggering around, I reluctantly followed them inside. How glad I am that I did. I might have gone through life without having an important cultural experience. Today I saw Salvador Dali's painting of the Crucifixion, the real one, not a reproduction. They've hung it at the end of the corridor so that it changes as you get nearer to it. When you are finally standing up close to it, you feel like a midget. It is absolutely fantastic. Huge with dead good colours, and Jesus looks like a real bloke. I bought 6 postcards of it from the museum, but of course it's not the same as the real thing. One day I will take Pandora to see it, perhaps on our honeymoon.
Bravo.
Oh, brilliant.
Bravo.
Brilliant. So good.
Before we get into any autobiographical details, I may wish to supplement that story with Nina. Do you want to just tell us some of the nice things or crafty things that Sue Townsend is doing as a writer to make us laugh?
Well, in there, she's, we know what she's doing. First of all, I think her first clever idea is to have a diary, to make it a diary, because with a diary, you're not bogged down with exposition. She's just going to introduce characters, and it's up to us to work out who they are. She doesn't need to tell us why something's happened. And I love that about diaries. And isn't that true of diaries when you think of Pooter and Bridget Jones and Diary of a Provincial Woman? They're brilliant because you get all meat. There's no veg.
Yeah.
In other words, you can cut straight into the voice.
Yes.
Telling you the thing, can't you? You don't have to explain.
You don't have to explain.
Yeah.
And because the conceit is that Adrian's writing this diary for himself, he's not writing it for us, so he can just sort of ramble on and give us bits of detail. I mean, did you notice there's a lovely bit in the entries I've just read, which is her obsession with writing and writers, that Mrs. Ball's daughter is a writer, not because she's qualified, but because she was dropped on her head.
And
went a bit queer after that. So there's that. But for me, the thing she does best and what makes this diary the absolute joy is the detail. Oh, yes, he's very proud to have got 20 out of 20 for his geography test. So he's told us that. He sort of talks about it a bit. And then he says, there's nothing I don't know about the Norwegian leather industry. He's just so proud of himself. So it's those little details. Adrian's he's got this friend Bert, and he lives in an old people's home, and he takes some woodbines round to Bert And obviously it's important that him and Pandora are very kind to Bert, and that Bert's met this lovely lady friend, Queenie, and they've got engaged. So that's the entry. Bert and Queenie have got engaged. But what Sue tells us is they've got their names on the same ashtray. So someone's obviously got a marker pen, like this is Bert and Queenie's ashtray. And it's those little delightful things. And when it's the royal wedding and he misses the vows, he doesn't miss the vows because he's gone out to make a cup of tea. He's gone upstairs to get some toilet paper for his nan, who's crying and have forgotten her handkerchief. And also, the bit we've talked about with Noddy, it's the bells on Noddy's hat that keep coming through, which is just it's for me. It's those details that I think. I mean, I'm being very self-obsessed as always. That's what made me be a details person. I mean, it's those little extras that I think made it really, really funny.
I remember you complimenting me, Nina, which is very kind of you, on my use of a particular IKEA brand name of a glass in one of my books. And you said to me, yes, I like it when somebody goes to the trouble of actually specifying
the detail.
Skvepa in that instance.
For me, that's what's funny.
Can I observe that the bit you just read, Nina, there's a couple of things that in there that remind me of other writers of great comic prose. She does a thing that David Nobbs used to do, which is find a seemingly innocuous phrase and have characters use it over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
Right? So Adrian has just my luck, which you think you couldn't get anything out of that, right? You wouldn't think, but because Nobbs and I think Sue Townsend realised we all do that. We all say something like more or less, more than other people do. It becomes very truthful and very funny to see just my luck come out over and over.
I borrowed this from Sue without realising it. In my autobiographical novel called Man at the Helm, the young me has seen that my mother wrote in a letter to the school. She said, I'm sorry, Nina has to miss PE. I know that I used the name Lizzie because it wasn't entirely autobiographical. So Lizzie has to miss PE or something because the dog's run away. Which again, the runaway dog that I've obviously borrowed. And it's imperative that we get her back. And then I repeat this word imperative over and over again. Everything's imperative. And I learned that we all learned that from Sue. That's such a clever thing.
Well, also you mentioned the phrase. So this reminds me of a different writer. You met her gift for a phrase, which is often a rhythmic one, right? Norwegian leather industry is incredibly pleasing as a construction, isn't it? Just hearing the words out loud or reading them on the page. Norwegian leather industry is very good. There's a bit in the one you read out here when he's doing the list of. So this is one of the things about Adrian. She gets a lot of good comedy out of the fact that Adrian is the adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So Adrian, it's through Adrian's eyes we see the childish antics of everyone who's supposed to be in a position of authority around him. Yeah. Particularly the parents, particularly teachers and whatever. And when you were listing those things where he's pointing out to them that they ought not to go mountain climbing because they were too old, unqualified. And there's two brilliant phrases here. Weren't wearing stout boots. So that's stout boots is a kind of nice blunt thing, followed by and had no compass map or sustaining hot drinks.
Yes,
sustaining hot drinks, Nina. A word I will allege is borrowed from none other than A.A. Milne and Winnie the Pooh. Sustaining is a word in Winnie the Pooh, which he gets much fun out of. Do you find that when you're writing, you can hear the rhythm of what you need,
Yes.
but you can't quite get the words.
Yeah, I often do. And I've just I'm in the middle of a novel at the moment, and I was rereading a book that I know you love, which is The Fortnight in September. I know you love it. I love it too, and I've just reread it. And the word tawdry jumped out at me. And it's not a word I think about or use, but it's perfect for a couple of things. So it's this thing that borrowing words, and we know that Sue was a huge reader as a child and a young person. I mean, there's a list of her. I don't know if any of you've got this 30th anniversary edition that I've got.
I don't have that.
It's a very lovely edition because there's an interview with her in the back. Which authors have most influenced you as a writer? And she replies in rough chronological order: Richmal Crompton, Charlotte Bronte, Alfred E. Newman, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Mark Twain, Dickens, George Eliot, Oscar Wilde, Chekhov, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Kingsley Amis, Evelyn Waugh, George Orwell, Stella Gibbons, Iris Murdoch, Flaubert, John Updike, Richard North. She's a big reader.
Wow. Yeah. I don't even know why I'm saying wow. I knew that anyway.
Sounds like Adrian. He was a big reader too.
But Adrian was a big reader.
But also on those two things, one is that, I don't know, that painting was in my grandparents' house. That, and a reproduction of that painting. That painting was definitely
of Salvador Dali's Crucifixion. Yes.
But also, I remember being dragged around the Highlands by my, for on a holiday with my parents, and my dad was reading the John Preble book, Blanco. They're just really perfect cultural moments.
Well, I will now tell people that one of the sources of pain for me. I was in Glasgow last week, and I went to the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery. Is it called Kelvin Grove Art Gallery?
Yeah, it is.
Which is amazing. It's beautiful. And I can report, that the painting has moved from where it lived in Adrian and my day. Adrian's and my day.
It's not down the corridor.
But they do still sell postcards in the shop. And when I was a teenager and my mum took me to look at that, I was bowled over by the painting in exactly the same terms. I hadn't read Adrian Mole then.
Dead good colours.
In exactly the same terms Adrian describes. And I too purchased half a dozen postcards from the gift shop and sent them to everyone I knew, and then got home and read Adrian Mole and felt like I had been publicly shamed.
You've just been seen
for my pretentiousness. But please, what did I send you all last week?
You did send me a postcard.
Yes.
And you signed it AM.
I'm sorry, I'm not much trying to make a land grab. It's just I felt I was walking in the footsteps of my teenage self, like I always do, really. So when we come back, we're going to hear 2 chat show appearances from Sue Townsend, approximately 35, even 40 years apart. But first, let's have a word from our sponsors.
New Vitamin Water Zero Sugar Pineapple Passion Fruit is packed with vitamins, just like the amount of peas we packed in that sentence. It's packed like your tote bag, the one you stole from your ex, or your overpriced half-a-studio apartment, or extra rushed rush hour traffic. Packed like your calendar, triple booked at 5, of course. Grab a Vitamin Water. Did we mention it's packed with vitamins?
Finding a new job is stressful. But with Indeed, it doesn't have to be. Just fill out your Indeed profile with your skills, experience, and desired salary. The more you fill out, the better your matches will be. And hearing from hiring managers will be 2 times more likely. Relax. That's your Indeed profile sending opportunities your way. Indeed, the world can work better.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second LTE internet plan with smartphone plan savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
And we're back. Welcome back, everybody. So we're just about to hear a clip now from an appearance that Sue Townsend made on the 10th of February 1983 on Russell Harty's chat show. And then we're going to fast forward by 35 years to 2008, where she's talking to Jim Naughtie on Radio 4. But the question hasn't changed.
Tell us, if we don't know who Adrian is, who he is, where have you found him?
Well, I found him in Leicester. That's where I live. And he's very ordinary, but he's extraordinary at the same time.
And he has a lot of problems, doesn't he?
Well, yes. I mean, he's a typical teenager in that they seem to spend their whole, that whole period having problems, getting over one and then finding another one.
Now, he has very, very peculiar family.
Do you think so? Gosh, you've led a sheltered life.
Can I ask you when and how you first heard in your head the voice of Adrian Mole?
I can tell you precisely. It was one of those Sunday afternoons that Hancock described as being so boring you start to fill in the O's of the news of the world. I was sitting with my 3 children in a council house. We had no money. And my eldest son said to me, "Mum, why don't we go to safari parks like other families do?" Which is one of the few lines from life that I used it in the first Mole book. And it reminded me of how we gradually begin to examine our parents very carefully with that very cold eye of adolescence.
As if they're a spot on your own face.
As if they are a blemish on you because you hate their clothes, their choice of food, their furniture, everything about their lives. And you can't quite believe you were born of these parents. It's a common fantasy in adolescence. And Mole shares that as well.
The thing that they mentioned there, we've talked a bit about the parents and, his understanding of his parents changing. And I listened to that and thought it's really perfect example of the unparenting that went on in the 80s. But there's also loads of really other great characters in there. The girlfriend, or who Pandora becomes the girlfriend, the menacing, the bully. What was the bully's name?
Yeah, Barry Kent.
Barry Kent. Yeah, and Nina, what role does Barry and what do these other sort of and Burt Baxter play in this? The sort of surrounding characters.
Well, I think the probably the most important other character is Pandora Braithwaite, his treacle-haired girlfriend. She's very important all the way through, and she's such a sort of foil to him. Like, she goes off to Tunisia on holiday. So she's very, very important, and he sort of trails around after her, but occasionally gets the upper hand. And actually, towards the end of this diary, he meets somebody else. Do you remember Barbara Boyer?
Mm-hmm.
Barbara Boyer, who he has a platonic affair with her. Yeah. And there's Burt Baxter, who's the elderly man who starts out at age 89. And what's interesting, in my lovely edition, which has the interview with Sue, she talks about Burt Baxter a bit. And she says one of her few regrets about things that she did in the first book was she made him too old because he couldn't go on and on and on. And she finally killed him off at 105. But she.
Oh, that's really okay. That's absolutely interesting.
It's incredible.
Isn't it? You discover as you write that what the potential of the comedy is, and then you think,
yes. What can I? Yeah. So she obviously started writing him, and we heard how modest she was. She had no idea that she was going to need to keep these characters going. My favourite characters by far are George and Pauline Mole, Adrian's parents. I think they're utterly fantastic. Pauline has discovered Germaine Greer.
Started wearing dungarees and overalls.
Dungarees, yeah, and hennering her hair. But Adrian's interesting because he's very cross with her for anything that she does that distracts her from shopping and cooking. He's quite reactionary and very judgmental about his mother, and he worries that he's going to get scurvy, and he worries about his acne, and he thinks because they don't have enough vitamins, she's not doing her job. But I love. I mean, I'm not going to worry too much about spoilers. It's such an old book, and I'm sure everyone's read it. But when I was a kid, my parents had divorced when I was very, very young, and I always wanted them to get back together. Not that they ever would, but I remember that Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton did get back together. It gave me hope. And actually, when I was reading this as a 20-year-old, I was thinking, please let them get back together. Let her dump Lucas.
Okay.
Because isn't that? Do you remember there's a great bit where about the dry cleaning ticket, and then she says, she's getting upset, and his dad George rings Lucas, and what is it? I've got it here. It says, "My father rang Sheffield and ordered Lucas to cease communications or risk getting a bit of Sheffield steel in between his porky shoulder blades." But this is what I love. "My father looked dead good on the telephone. He had a cigarette stuck between his lips. My mother was leaning on the corner of the fridge. She had a cigarette in her hand. They looked a bit like Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall postcard on my wall. I wish I was a real gangster son. At least you'd see a bit of life."
So that's
at least you see a bit of life. Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, beautiful.
But also, it's that lovely vignette of his parents kind of getting together and sticking it to Lucas.
So I love that they're not just in the background as parents often are, and certainly were in children and young adults books, that the parents just had to disappear. She really gets a lot out of them.
Don't you think the reason why all of this stuff works so well is, and actually why it holds up now, is that the detail, the 80s detail, like it's so set in its time, and all of the parents, the references,
Kevin Keegan key ring.
Exactly. I had Kevin Keegan slippers, and the parents going through, unemployment or a kind of, discovering feminism. All this stuff is so of its time. And actually, that was the thing that I chuckled so much about when I was listening to it this week, thinking, this is all so funny. The 80s details are fantastic.
Can I just share with you, please, a brief paragraph from the Listener magazine, the now defunct Listener magazine, sadly, which was written in about 1985, where the writer notes this, and I if I just read this to you, I'd be very interested to see what you make of this. He says, "Adrian Mole offers its audience a way of coping with anxieties which are very close to home, and most of which are particular concern to women, they being the ones who are usually left to pick up the pieces. With soaring divorce rates, high unemployment, and rapid changes in family life, the England of the early 1980s was ripe for Adrian Mole. Central to its phenomenal success," Nina, that's phenomenal with a capital P, "is the reversal of roles, whereby Adrian is essentially the adult of the family, while the supposed grown-ups behave most of the time like naughty children. This reversal has great symbolic potency. Most of Dickens's novels are based around some form of it, and perhaps it is especially powerful at this particular time. We are still to a great extent living in the fallout from the upheavals of the 1960s, but we are in radically changed social and economic circumstances. Our instincts may still be hedonistic, permissive, regressive, but there are harsh imperatives and responsibilities to be faced, and life is hard. How are the children of the 60s to grow up and to become adults? For many people, I suspect Adrian Mole is, underneath the laughter, giving some sort of answer to that question. When the social history of the 1980s comes to be written, the Mole books, astonishing though it may seem now, will probably be considered as key texts."
Fantastic.
Yes.
So good.
He was
Who was
right.
this?
Written by Nigel Andrew. So Nigel Andrew had a good day at the office 40 years ago. That was excellent.
I would also say what I noticed when I reread it was just how dark it is. It's way darker than I remember. And much more emotionally, in places really quite bleak and difficult. And I don't. It's funny you remember the funny bits. You remember you remember the dog, and you remember Bert Baxter. But actually, the poverty and the
anxiety.
Memories,
the electricity is going to be cut off. He watches his father lose his job. And he says something like, he says, It's pathetic to see how unemployment has reduced my father to childish dependence on others. And that, amongst all the laughter in that section of the book, it's heartbreaking. It's horrible.
Yeah. One of my theories about the phenomenon of mole, I'd be interested, Nina, to know what you think of this, is like many popular phenomena, be they in literature or music or film, they always come as something of a surprise to the author. I'm thinking of Douglas Adams. I'm thinking of our guest Chris Chibnall a few episodes ago, who said on the show that the success of Broadchurch was a huge surprise to him, not least because he thought he was writing something that was like Twin Peaks, but the audience received in a different way. And I wonder how you feel about the idea that I think Sue Townsend thought she was writing a much more satirical, political and left-wing book, given her background. I completely agree. And the whole thing about what we've been celebrating, the jokes about adolescence and Adrian, that was the surprise to her. I don't think that's what she meant to do. No,
I think you're right, Andy. I think she set out to write a really hardline satire.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
It was the set against the early years of Thatcher. Can you imagine what? I mean, we're none of us old enough to remember quite what that must have felt like. She described herself as being left of Lenin and Livingston, and she was a genuine socialist.
Sorry to interrupt, Nina. And her background prior to this is really textbook 80s agitprop theatre. Here it comes. Here it comes, Nicky. She had a piece at the Croydon Warehouse Theatre.
Hey, the Croydon bell has rung.
I hadn't really thought about any of this while reading the book on the number of times I've read it, or any of the subsequent books or the telly. It's preparing for this event, this podcast, that made me really look into this side of it and thinking, now this is clever. This book, in my opinion, my new opinion is it should be ranked alongside Martin Amis's Money. It's hard, brilliant political satire. I mean, Jonathan Coe's What a Carve Up. You don't see Sue Townsend on those lists. You don't see that. Some of the language comes straight out of the Tory Party manifesto, 1979. Yeah. The short, sharp shock that Barry Kent's got to have, the anger about juvenile delinquency, the racism. There's a brilliant bit. Mr. Cherry from the newsagent, rather opportunistically, brings out some old magazines that he wants to burn. And this magazine is called Now Magazine. Now with an exclamation mark. So I looked up Now Magazine. Do you know what Now Magazine is?
Yes.
It's a magazine that was launched in 1979-ish by, what's his name? Goldsmith. I can't remember his name. James Goldsmith.
Yes,
who was
right, yeah.
What was he? He was in the Tory party. I can't remember what his actual job was. Was he?
He was a billionaire, wasn't he?
He was a grandee.
He was a grandee.
Big donor, and anyway, so he launched this magazine, and it's something to do with the timing of the newspapers going on strike. The right-wing press went on strike. It's to do with Wapping and all that. So he launched this magazine, and it's basically a Tory party manifesto ongoing. But it didn't catch on, and it went out of business. And so the joke is that Mr. Cherry, the newsagent, wants to burn all these, but guess what? They don't burn. They're still there the next morning. And it's those things that people, we don't remember them. We remember... Barry Kent.
We remember the Big and Bouncy magazine.
We do.
But we don't.
Her agenda, when you're looking for it, is not very hidden. But as you say, we the highest bar is laugh out loud. So that's what we want, and that's what we remember. This reading and reading about her politics a bit more and has made all of that jump out at me more. For instance, think of the women in this book, how strong they are, how they run the show, from Pandora, Pauline. His nan sorts out Barry Kent.
Yeah, that's one of my favourites.
Yeah, it's one of my favourites. It's so great.
And the men, the men aren't idiots, but they aren't in charge. They clearly are not the boss. The fact that Adrian himself, he spouts Thatcherist views a lot. He's very judgmental. He's incredibly patriotic. When there's the royal wedding, he talks about nobody does pageantry like the British. He loves it, and he's a little bit xenophobic. But as the book goes on, he kind of finds his social conscience, and he's very tolerant, and he becomes quite angry about about the sort of the slash in funding to certain things, whether it be on the NHS, where suddenly at age 14 he gets a letter saying he's going to have his tonsils out. And he says that's because he had an appointment about swollen tonsils when he was 5. And it's taken that long, and it came as a bit of a shock.
Yeah,
and also this thing about school meals, that you used to get a decent meal and now you get pizza and chips. So he starts, complaining about the very things that Thatcherism are doing. Whereas at the beginning, he's cross with his mum for being a feminist.
Let's just hear one more clip now. Like all the best writers, Sue Townsend hated writing. Here's a little clip of her talking about it, and you'll hear from various people, including her husband again, her editor, and so forth, about how difficult she found writing.
The thing is, he's had to adjust to my mad hours. My mad hours are midnight onwards. It takes me that long to get the courage to start to write because, I've always found it a very difficult process. I have to kind of get myself worked up, and about midnight I'm ready.
Her editor has worked with her through the night and has typed for her as well, Louise. I'm sure she'd tell you the same story. It just happened all the time.
It was absolutely terrible. She'd only write if she and everyone else was brooking it. I mean, that was the awful truth of it, and it was very hard on everyone. It was very hard on her, but it was very hard on us.
So we touched very briefly on that there, on the subject of her various illnesses. She was never in great health, and she had various conditions, diabetes and progressive blindness as she get older. But I think, Nina, perhaps one way in which she was fortunate is it strikes me that because she was a writer, she was a playwright first and a writer of dramatic dialogue, that perhaps dictating Mole was not as arduous as it might have been for other people. Yeah. As you say, because the tone is conversational.
I've written diaries, and I've written fictional diaries, and it is a really nice way of doing it. It's so much easier that it feels like a cheat when you're doing it. You think, oh, no, can I get away with this? Yeah.
Just jump cuts, isn't it? You don't have to, as you say, no exposition. You don't have to get people in and out of the room.
And for the reader,
you don't have to explain
it's
historical
manageable
background.
Chunks, and you can read it on the toilet type thing. But also, you do have to do a little bit of thinking, and that's quite satisfying as well. You don't really realise you're doing it. You don't think, hang on, who's this? You just think, okay, you're not cross about it because it's a diary. But I found that really moving, and I obviously that wasn't news to me that she had to dictate quite a lot of the work, and she wrote in a great big writing. And I find it very reassuring, like so many things about her, that she did find it difficult and didn't love it. I mean, you just don't want to hear of writers loving it. You want to hear that they hate it.
Oh, God, yeah. She's one of the patron saints, I think, when you perhaps start to aspire to being a writer, knowing they're so clever, these people, because they make the pain of it sound funny.
Yes. Oh, she's so funny about it.
Right, so she's very funny on it. If you listen to Douglas Adams talking about the absolute nightmare he had creating anything, at the same time, it's terribly seductive because you think, wow, that's what it's actually like, sitting there throwing jokes away rather than thinking of new ones.
I went to see the Sue Townsend archive at Leicester University a year or so ago. I didn't just turn up out of the blue. They invited me because I was doing a talk there, and the librarians and the archivists said, would you like to come in? So off I went, and they made a display of her sort of mood boards. I'm going to call it mood boards. I don't think she would have called it that, but it's her manuscripts are interesting. A lot of them are handwritten, and that's nice. But what was lovely was that they've kept all this paraphernalia that she collected. So, and it was stuff from the Mole family life. So it's takeaway restaurant menus, Chinese menus, and it's details of houses from estate agents, and there's a really lovely load of notes where she had to change the name from Nigel Mole to Adrian Mole. So you see her doing that. You see lots of her choosing the name. I mean, she never really liked Adrian. It was only the least worst. And on the back of her writing are shopping lists. She's got detailed notes or a bit of a play, a bit of dialogue, and on the back there's noughts and crosses with one of her children, and she's blotted her lipstick on it because she's got to go into a meeting. Everything merged with her, and it's just lovely. Anyone can visit the archive, by the way, and you can see Joe Orton's amazing archive as well there at the same time. So it's worth a visit.
Wow.
Okay, so I've got here an absolutely wonderful overview of the mole phenomenon of Sue's writing by Penelope Fitzgerald. And I was going to read some of that out here, but we've run out of time. However, if you are a subscriber to our Patreon at Lock Listener level or above, we always do a follow-up show as part of Locklisted when we've recorded one of these episodes of Backlisted, and I will be sharing that Penelope Fitzgerald piece.
Now there's a tease, isn't it?
I
Come
will.
on, guys, sign up.
That's how niche
more.
we are. Open your wallets now, and you'll hear me reading from Penelope Fitzgerald's thoughts on Adrian Mole. Although I will tease you with just one tiny extract from it because I think it's so brilliant. And Nina, this was written for, Penelope Fitzgerald wrote this for the LRB in 1989. So I like to think that because you turned Mary Kay down, she had to go and ask bloody Penelope Fitzgerald.
I know. I nearly said she nicked my job, but I thought, no, I can't say that. But I did think that.
Anyway, she says this.
How brilliant.
The epigraph to The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole is from D.H. Lawrence's Sons and Lovers. Quote, Paul walked with something screwed up tight inside him, yet he chatted away with his mother. He would never have confessed to her how he suffered over these things, and she only partly guessed. And then Penelope Fitzgerald writes, Sue Townsend is the mother who wholly guessed.
So
Isn't that good?
That's so
The
good.
Mother Who Wholly Guessed. There's the title of a biography for you. Anyway, yes,
brilliant.
John, do you want to take us out?
Yeah, I'm afraid that's where we must leave Adrian, Doreen, George and Pandora. Thanks, huge thanks to Nina for joining us and giving us the perfect excuse for revisiting our former selves, and to our producer Nicky Birch for keeping us
If you
real.
would like show notes with clips, links and suggestions for further reading for this show and the umpteen that we've already recorded, please visit our website at backlisted.fm. If you want to buy the books discussed on this or any of our other shows, visit our shop at bookshop.org and choose Backlisted as your bookshop.
At backlisted.fm, you can also sign up for a free New Look fortnightly newsletter where we preview each show, share our guests' book recommendations, and news about events and giveaways. And don't forget Patreon. Andy mentioned before, patreon.com/backlisted. If you subscribe at the Lock Listener level, you get 2 extra exclusive podcasts every month. And the next one will feature Andy, Nicky and I talking about this show and recommending other books, films and music we've enjoyed in the previous fortnight. Also, people who subscribe as the Lock Listener level get their names read out like this. Paul Gill, thank you. David Bloom, thank you. Dean Emery, thank you. Gabriel Brodetsky, thank you.
Tyson Stolte, thank you. Hannah Raskin, thank you. Veronica Makovsky, thank you. And David Marshall, thank you. Now, we have to wrap up, but before we go, Nina, is there any last observation you would like to make about Adrian Mole or Sue Townsend that we didn't quite have time for in the show? Is there anything you want to say that that you want to leave on the record right now?
Yes. I would like to leave on the record that when my brother, who was at university when this book first came out, was reading it and had it in his pocket at his summer job at Pucker Pies, he pulled out the book at his tea break and he was attacked by the other workers at Pucker Pies, who called him a pretentious twat and put him into a freezer for a bit. By the end of the week, they were all fans of the book. That is the phenomenon of Adrian Mole.
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful, Nina. Thank you so much.
That's perfect.
Lovely use of the word phenomenon again.
Also, Pucker Pies.
I learned it from Sue, that whole thing.
Pucker Pies phenomenon. Yeah. It's alliteration.
Pucker
Amazing. All right, listen. Thank you so much, everybody. And Nina, thank you so much. This has been a gas.
Amazing.
Come back in 7 years' time.
Well, let's do Philip Larkin again.
Who knows?
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See you in a
Bye-bye.
fortnight. Okay.
Friday, October 2nd, 6 p.m. I am very unhappy and have once again turned to great literature for solace. It's no surprise to me that intellectuals commit suicide, go mad, or die from drink. We feel things more than other people. We know the world is rotten and that chins are ruined by spots. I am reading Progress, Coexistence, and Intellectual Freedom by Andrei D. Sakharov. It is an inestimably important document, according to the cover. 11:30 p.m. Progress, Coexistence, and Intellectual Freedom is inestimably boring, according to me, Adrian Mole. I disagree with Sakharov's analysis of the causes of the revivalism of Stalinism. We are doing Russia at school, so I speak from knowledge. Saturday, October 3rd. Pandora is cooling off. She didn't turn up at Bert's today. I had to do his cleaning on my own. Went to Sainsbury's as usual in the afternoon. They are selling Christmas cakes. I feel that my life is slipping away. I am rereading Wuthering Heights. It is brilliant. If I could get Pandora up somewhere high, I'm sure we would regain. I'm sure we could regain our old passion.
Thank you.